Hey guys, so set 4 for Teamfight Tactics Fate is finally here. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on every single champion and synergy in set 4. First, I would like to say that I've been looking at the champions and all the synergies set, and this is probably the most excited I've ever been for playing a new set. There's actually like so many cool mechanics in this game, like Set, who just runs off your board and does setups mid team fights, and Lee Sin, who can kick your units out of the map. And a new mechanic of this set is Chosen, and occasionally in your shop, you'll be offered a Chosen champion. These champions are already 2-star leveled, and one of their traits is Chosen, so it counts as 2 of the traits, kind of how Lux worked in set 2. They also get 200 HP and a unique stack bonus, either 500 HP, 35% spell power, or 50 AD, or 25% reduced mana cost. Alright, the first origin we have is Cultists, which is once your team loses 50% of their health, a Galio is summoned, slamming the largest cluster of the enemies and knocking them up. So this is a 3 synergy, a 6 synergy, and 9 synergy, and depending on which one you have, it summons which type of Galio. So the first champion is Elise, who transforms, gaining max HP and heals on autos, so like Elise's ultimate. TF is the same, and he throws 3 cards. Pike is the same as in set 1, and it's Assassin, who dashes to the backline and stuns. Eve is also about the same as in set 1, and ultis for damage and teleports away and does more damage to units under 50%. Kalista attack stacks on a unit until it is enough to kill them. Jim is the same as last set and does extra damage on the 4th shot. Aatrox now is a 4 cost, and he pulls in 1 or 2 units and slams damage. Zillion works like in League, ulti, and revives 1 or 2 units with 400 HP, so it works like GA. So Cultists is a synergy that can be played well early game and late game. There's 2 1 cost and also a 2 cost. The most common late game build I think we'll see with this combo will probably be some form of Vanguard Mystics, because Aatrox is a Vanguard and Zillion is a Mystic. So you can play like Jhin, Aatrox, Zillion, and then you just add a Sejuani for Vanguards with the Aatrox. You add a Sharpshooter with Jhin, and then you just add a Mystic for Zillion, and that's your core comp. Next up, we have the Vayne synergy. Upon attacking 6 times or dropping below 50% health, the Vayne units ascend, taking 25% reduced damage and dealing bonus true damage for the rest of the combat. Either 2 for 20, 4 for 40, 6 at 65, and 8 at 100%. So when I first read this, I think it's more so a 2 synergy or 4 synergy, because the units don't seem like they fit in that well together. And the bonus you get from 4 to 6 isn't that huge, I think, since you already get the 25% reduced. So I think this is more so like a 2 or 4 synergy kind of comp. First, we have Wukong, who is also a Vanguard, and he attacks, dealing damage and stunning them. Next is Jax, who's the same as last set and just dodges attacks and then stuns. Aurelia is different now and doesn't seem to do as much damage and is more of a utility champion where it disarms units. Lux is the same and snares the champions furthest from her. Warwick is now a carry unit and gains attack speed and lifesteal and fear nearby units on takedowns. Lee Sin actually does a decent amount of damage, and he kicks units like it does in League. His ultimate kicks units, and units that collides with it also get stunned. And if you get kicked at the edge of the map, you get knocked off the entire board completely. Next up is Dusk, and Dusk pretty much works like Sorks from previous sets. Dusk champions increase all ally spell power, 2 at 20%, and at 4 increase all Dusk champions gain an additional 40%, and at 6, 50% for all your units, and then all your Dusk champions get 100%. Vayne pretty much works the same about what she did in set 1, but instead of doing % true damage, she now does a flat amount of damage. Thresh is the same as it was in set 2 and shields your allies. Riven does the same as it did the last set and needs a shield and slashes on the 3rd cast. Cassiopeia spell is now her ultimate, stunning units in a cone. Lilia is the 5 cost of this comp and puts enemies to sleep, and they're awakened after a certain amount of damage is taken, and then they take an extra damage. So I think this synergy will get played at 2 synergy, 4 synergy, and 6 synergy. And I think the most common 6 synergy one we'll see will be these 5 units, with one of them being Chosen. And then you just add in Aatrox, because Aatrox does a lot of damage, and the extra 50 spell power will probably be pretty good. And also it gives Vanguard with Thresh, so your front line could be Riven, Thresh and Aatrox. And then with Aatrox, with Cassiopeia, you can play Zilean, who will revive your front line of Riven and Aatrox when they die. So I think that will actually be a pretty good comp if you just play like 6 Dusk, or well, 5 Dusk, Zilean, and Aatrox. Next up we have Enlighten, which generates more mana depending on how many synergies you have. So 2 is 50%, 4 is at 75%, and 6 is at 100%. So Nami bubbles the closest unit, stunning it. Fiora is the same as it has been, and Repulse, stunning an enemy. Janna shields a few allies from damage and gives them AD. Aurelia disarms units. Morgana summons a pool, dealing damage and lowering their MR. Talon is an assassin that becomes unstoppable if his spell kills your units, and it leaps to your unit that has dealt the most amount of damage so far this round. So my thoughts looking at this synergy is that it probably won't be played as a 6 synergy. It's more so something that you play with a 2 or 4. Like, it's like you have like a blue buff or Sojin on one of these units, and you want them to generate more mana, you play probably 2 or 4. Next up we have Elderwood, where every 2 seconds all Elderwood champions grow, gaining bonus stats. This effect stacks up to 5 times. At 3 champions you get 20 armor and magic resist, 5 AD and spell power. At 6 you get 35 armor and MR, 10 AD and spell power. At 9 you get 60 armor and MR, 25 AD and spell power. So Maokai Q's in front of him, dealing damage and slowing attack speed. Hecarim W's around him, healing him for 2 seconds. Lulu gives the lowest ally HP and knocks up units around it. Veigar targets the lowest HP unit, and if it kills the unit, he gets permanent spell power for the rest of the game. Nunu bites a target, dealing damage, and it'll do extra damage if that unit has less health than Nunu. Ashe gains attack speed and increased AD. Ezra ulti the furthest unit, granting healing to his allies and giving them attack speed, while dealing damage to enemies and slowing their attack speed. So some of the combat I think you can play with this synergy will probably be like the Maokai, Nunu, Ashe combo, where you also play Warwick and Set for 4 brawlers, and you have 2 hunters, and you eventually probably play Ezreal, and you fill out your comp like that as a good core. Also, you can probably go the Mage Vanguard route with Hecarim, Lulu, Veigar, because there's these 2 mages, and then you just play Sejuani or Aatrox as your Vanguard, and then play mages with your Vanguard Elderwood. I don't think this comp will be a good 9 synergy, because these units don't all really mesh that well together, as in like 2 of them are mages and the other one's hunter, and I feel like that doesn't really fit that well. And Ezreal is probably just a good unit to play, so he can fit in your comp somehow. Next up there's Exile, and in Exile if there's no adjacent units at the start of the combat, they gain a shield equal to 50% of their maximum health, and at 2 you get a 100% lifesteal. So Yasuo just stabs the units in front of him, dealing damage, and I don't know how to say his champion since it's new, it's like Yan or something, and he strikes in front of him, dealing high damage split between enemies hit and knocking them up for 2 seconds. Enemies hit have their MR and armor reduced by 60%. After he casts that spell, he gets a new spell where he dashes to the lowest target that he marked and he kills them instantly. So this unit seems like a pretty good unit to play standalone, because it has like good CC and good damage. Next up we have Fortune. Winning combat against a player will give you bonus orbs. The longer you've gone without an orb, the bigger the payout. The champions in this is Tahm Kench, who ignores a little of damage from all sources. Annie, who's the same as last set, it gets a shield and deals damage in a cone in front of her. Jinx now has a 3 cost, and her next auto will stun the target, dealing damage to it and nearby units. Katarina is the same as it was in set 1 and channels a spinning throwing knife. Sejuani is also the same as set 1 and throws a firecracker now, stunning units. So my thoughts on this synergy is it's hard to know unless you get the numbers of what the orbs are. But just looking at the 1, 2, 3 cost, I feel like it would be hard to win if your comp consists of Tahm Kench, Annie, and Jinx early. So it might be like a later game comp where you play Sejuani with Jinx, and you play that in like the comp I mentioned above with like Jhin and Zilean, Aatrox. That way you get Sharpshooter and Vanguards, and you just throw in a random Fortune, just hope you win. But it's just really hard to know like how good this trait is just because you don't know like what the actual numbers are. Next up there's Moonlight, where at the start of combat the lowest star level Moonlight champion stars up until combat ends. So it means you're like, let's say you have a 2-star, it becomes a 3-star. If you have a 3-star, it becomes a 4-star. Lissandra throws a dagger that does damage and explodes. Diana works the same as did in set 2 and shields herself, and the orbs also do damage. Aphelios summons a turret that attacks when Aphelios attacks. Silas launches a chain, dealing damage and reducing their next spell cost by 40%. So this comp looks like it's a reroll comp of the set, and you try to 3-star everything, and then you hit your 4 stars. But so I don't really know how strong this comp is, because we've never seen 4 stars, so it just depends on like the balancing of the comp pretty much, on how good it will be. Next up is Ninja, where it's about the same as it was in set 1. Ninjas give you bonus attack damage and spell power, depending on how many ninjas you have, either 1 or 4 exactly. So at 1 you get 45 AD and spell power, and at 4 you get 90 AD and 90 spell power. So Zed is the same as he was in set 3, he does damage on a 3rd auto attack and steals AD. Kennen was the same as he was in set 1 and summons a storm around him, dealing damage and stunning enemies. Akali is about the same as it was in set 1 I think, and throws a kunai and deals damage. Shen is now a 4 cost, and he shields himself while taunting enemies for 3 seconds. So how I think this comp will get played is you're probably going to play 4 ninjas, and you're probably going to play at least 2 to 4 assassins, and you add an Adept for the Shen and Aurelia combo. And you also get Enlighten with Aurelia and Talon. Next up is Spirit. The first time a Spirit casts their spell, all allies gain attack speed based on the spell's mana cost. So 2 it's at 35%, 4 it's at 90%. So Teemo fires her dart that explodes, dealing damage and blinding enemies. Yuumi dashes to the lowest health ally, healing it and giving it attack speed. Kindred is about the same as it was in set 2, where Wolf mauls the target and Lamb leaps away. Ahri is pretty much Goku and channels a large spirit ball of energy and then lobs it, dealing damage within 2 hexes. So pretty much I think this is more of a 2 synergy, because unless you have the Chosen synergy on one of your units, because it's hard to have 4 of these units on your team because none of them really share the same trait unless you have Chosen, because then you don't have to play all 4. But this synergy looks kind of cool because you can just dip in a 2 synergy, which will be pretty easy because Ahri's a mage and Yumi's a mystic and Kindred's a hunter and Teemo's a spirit, so you can easily just dip this into like those comps. Next is Warlord. Warlords have a bonus health and spell power. Each win you get they participate in increases his bonus by 10%, stacking up to 5 times. So at 3 you get 200 HP and 20 spell power. At 6 you get 400 HP and 40 spell power. And at 9 you get 70 HP and 70 spell power. So Nidalee throws spears to the furthest enemy and does more damage per traveled hex. Garen spins in a circle, reducing magic damage taken. J4 strikes the furthest enemy within 3 hexes and pulls himself towards it and does damage and knocks up enemies along its path. Vi attacks enemy in a cone, reducing their armor. Xin sweeps around him, dealing damage and does bonus damage to those units while taking 50% less damage. Katarina is the same as set 1 and spins in a circle and does damage. Azir is the 5 costs of this comp. Azir charges forward, knocking back enemies, dealing damage, and creates an impassable wall for 3 seconds, and the spear he summons from his trait will move with him. So looking at this comp, I think most likely for your mid game, Xin will be your carry, and he's also a duelist, so you'll probably have like a Xin, Vi, Jax combo, and you probably stack Xin in this comp until you hit Azir, and you probably play like BT Xin or something like that. The next trait, which is only 1 champion, is the boss. When the boss first drops to 40% health, he removes himself from combat to start doing sit-ups. Each sit-up restores 15% health and gives him 20% attack speed. If he reaches full health, he returns to combat, pumped up, converting his basic attack and spell damage to true damage. If all of his allies die, he'll immediately return to combat. And what Set does is he grabs his targets, slams them forward, dealing 30%, 40%, and 100% of his targets maximum health and magic damage to all enemies in the large area. Enemies further from the epicenter take less damage. So looking at this unit, it's kind of hard to tell how strong he is, because you need to feel him in game to see like how much damage he does. But right now he looks more so like a tankier unit, because he tanks some damage, goes off your bench, heal backs up, and comes back in and does CC. But he also seems like he does a decent amount of damage. The last unit of the set is Kane, and he's a Tormented, where after participating for 3 combats, you have the ability to transform. So Kane is a Shade, which means he dashes to the enemy backline, and Kane's ability is that he dashes towards a nearby group of enemies, slashing them in a circle around him, dealing 300, 600, and 100,200 magic damage. Darken King restores 80% of damage dealt. Shadow King deals an additional 5, 10, 20 of the target's maximum health. So it looks like Kane is probably a pretty good unit to play solo, as he doesn't have that many synergies with other units. And Kane, after you play him for 3 rounds, he upgrades to either Darken or Shadow, where he gets a huge buff. So we pretty much went over every single champion and all the origins. And now we have the classes. So first up we have Adept. Adept calms the foe of the battle, reducing attack speed of all enemies by 50% for a few seconds at the start of combat. So this looks like a good thing that you just randomly just tech in when you're playing either Aurelia, Shen, or Yon, and you just tech in one of the other ones for the skill, because it actually seems really decent to just like slow all the enemies by 50% for the first few seconds. Next up we have Assassins. Assassins leap to the enemy backline at the start of the fight, and Assassins can critically strike and also have higher critical strike damage. So I think the main carries in this comp will either be Talon carry or Akali carry, or it might be reroll Diana in Moonlight. Next up are our Brawlers, where we have Tahm Kench, Maokai, Sylas, Vi, Nunu, Warwick, and Set. And Brawlers work like every set they have been, and Brawlers get increased health depending on how many you play. Next up we have Dazzler, where we have Lissandra, Lux, Morgana, Cassiopeia, and Ezreal. And Dazzler spells reduce their target's attack damage by 50% for a few seconds. Alright, so for Duelists we have Fiora, Yasuo, Jax, Kalista, Xin, and Lee Sin. Duelists move faster. Duelists grant attack speed up to 7 stacks. So all these Duelists actually look like they're pretty good champions. So you'll probably play either 2 or 4 Duelists in your endgame comp. And I think like all these champions have a point in time in the game, because Yasuo and Jax probably good early, Zin's probably good mid, and Yasuo's probably good late. Hunter, we have Aphelios, Kindred, Ashe, and Warwick. Every 3 seconds, all Hunters will attack the lowest health enemy, dealing increased bonus damage. So the most obvious one here that you see is probably the Ashe Warwick combo with like multiple Brawlers, because Ashe is also an Elderwood, and there's 2 Elderwood Brawlers. I don't know if you 3-star Aphelios in your comp, but if you do end up 3-starring your Aphelios, maybe 4-star Aphelios is good, and you play Warwick in that comp, because you get the Aphelios Warwick combo with Sylas for Brawlers, and that comp probably isn't too bad in reroll Moonlight. Next up we have Keeper, where we have Elise, Jarvan, Kennen, Riven, and Azir. At the start of combat, Keepers grant themselves and all nearby allies a shield for 8 seconds. The shield is 50% stronger on Keepers. So I think the positioning on this comp will be a little bit awkward, because you're not going to play like all Keepers like you do in Rebels. So you're not just going to have everyone just stack up all in like a circle like you do in Rebels. So it'd be pretty interesting to see like how people position their Keepers, because you still want your like Jarvan frontline, your Kennen frontline, and probably your Riven frontline. I don't really know what Azir does at this time. So your positioning is going to be a little bit awkward, I think, if you end up playing 4 Keepers. For Mage, we have Nami, TF, Annie, Lulu, Veigar, Ahri, and Lilia, I think. I'm not really sure what this champion is called. But Mage casts twice and have modified spell power. So looking at the 3-6 jump right now, I think it's mostly going to be 3 Mage comps. Because the thing is, even at 3 or 6, Mages cast twice. and your jump and spell power you get isn't even that big. So you might as well just play Dusk or something, because you have Lilia, who's a Dusk, and you can easily just play another Dusk, like, what's the champion called? Cassiopeia, and you just play Mystic, like, just like that, and you get 20% spell power, so it's probably just a 3 mage kind of comp, and Ari's kind of broken with the Goku style ability, so mage is probably going to be somewhat meta. Mystic is Janna, Yuumi, Cassiopeia, and Zillion. So it's pretty much just like every set, almost everyone just dips in a little bit of 2 Mystics, depends on what you fight, and if like the entire lobby's AP, you might be able to play 4 Mystics, depending on your comp. So for Shade, you have Zed, Evelynn, and Kane. So Shades also work like assassins, where they just teleport to the backline, and every third attack, Shades go back into the Shadow Realm or something, and they stealth, causing their next basic attack to deal bonus magic damage. So look at Shade, right? It's kind of awkward to make a comp around Shade. I feel like Shade looks really good if you hit a chosen Zed or chosen Evelynn that is Shade, and you just end up playing 3 Shade as your mid game, and then 4 Shade late game. Next up is Sharpshooter, where we have Vayne, Nidalee, Teemo, Jinx, and Jhin. So the main character in this comp is probably most likely going to be Jhin, and you're probably going to play him in either 2 Sharpshooter or 4 Sharpshooters probably, because if you play him in like the Vayne combo, you get Dusk with like Cassiopeia, and then you get the Mystic with Yuumi, who also gives you Spirit with Teemo, so you can probably make some comp like that, and you also just play Aatrox and some kind of Vanguard frontline with that. So our last real trait is Vanguards, where we have Wukong, Garen, Thresh, Hecarim, Aatrox, and Sejuani. So Vanguards just work like last set, where they just get bonus armor. And I don't think you ever play 6 Vanguards anymore, because they nerfed 6 Vanguards pretty hard, because there's now a Vanguard spat, and there's also Chosen. So most likely at most you're just going to play 4 Vanguards, and Aatrox and Sejuani look pretty good. The last one is Emperor, which basically is just not really a trait, it's just like a passive for Azir. So Emperors deploy with 2 additional units that may be moved separately. These spearmen cast when their general does, and rapidly lose health when the general dies. So that sounds kind of cool, I guess, because I think it's just like Azir, but you get like 2 movable spearmen when you play him or something, and they just die when he dies. So yeah guys, thanks for watching like my rundown pretty much of Teamfight Tactics Set 4 Fates. I'm actually like, this is probably the most excited I've ever been probably to play a new set since like set 1 pretty much. But yeah, I'm probably going to post a lot of gameplay videos, and I'm going to try to post a decent amount of tier list as the patch goes on. But yeah, thanks for watching guys, and I hope you guys all have fun in set 4.